The auction house smelled of old paper and the particular kind of quiet that settles over rooms where money changes hands without ceremony. It was a Tuesday morning in March, and the lot in question was a rolling cabinet of machinist tools. A snap-on chest, 47 drawers, contents unmarked in the catalog, sitting on a concrete floor beside a folding table draped in white cloth. Diane Mercer, CEO of Mercer Industrial Solutions, stood 6 feet from it in a charcoal blazer and looked at it the way a person looks at something they have already decided to ignore. $300, she said to her assistant, a young man named Patrick who held a yellow legal pad and said nothing. That's what I'd pay for the whole mess. Maybe, if someone cleaned it first. She did not know that the man who had built those tools into a working system, who had calibrated, cataloged, and cross-referenced every item in that chest across 14 years of precision contract work, held 3 design patents on tooling fixtures still, in active use by 2 aerospace manufacturers. She did not know his name yet. She did not know that the man she was about to dismiss had once run a workshop that Pratt and Whitney had called, in a letter she would later read 3 times, irreplaceable. His name was Owen Marsh. He was 38 years old. He did not advertise. He did not have a website. He charged fairly. Stay with this one to the end. Every detail here is placed for a reason. The morning that cabinet sold, Owen was not in the auction room. He was at a kitchen table in a rented house on the east side of Millhaven, pouring cereal into a bowl for his daughter, Nora, who was 7, and who carried everywhere a small stuffed rabbit named Clover, one ear darker than the other from years of being held. The rabbit sat on the table beside the cereal box. Nora ate without hurry. Owen read nothing. He already knew what had happened to the tools. His ex-wife, Sandra, had called him the previous Friday to inform him that she had sold the cabinet and its contents for $300 through an estate liquidator. As part of the division of assets the court had finalized 6 weeks prior. She had described the sale in the same tone she used for logistics. He had listened without comment. He had not asked which liquidator or whether she had checked what the tools were worth. He had simply said, "All right," and ended the call. He had learned over the past 2 years that some things were not worth contesting. The tools were gone. The house on Carver Street was gone. Claire was gone, had been gone for 3 years now, taken by a pulmonary embolism at 34, in a hospital room that smelled of recycled air and the particular grief of things unfinished. He had not contested that either, because there was nothing to contest. He had simply reorganized around the fact of her absence, the way a structure reorganizes around a removed wall, carefully, and with attention to what still needed to bear weight. The downshift had been deliberate. After Claire died, Owen had looked at the workshop in Concord, the 4,200 square foot precision fabrication shop he had built from a single Bridgeport mill, and a reputation for tolerances that other machinists considered unreasonable. And he had understood that the life that workshop required was incompatible with raising Nora alone, the travel, the client calls at 11 at night, the weeks when the shop ran itself because he was in a conference room in Wichita or Toulouse explaining why his fixtures performed at 0.0002-inch repeatability when the spec called for 0.005. He had sold the Concord shop to a former employee named Ray Castillo for a fair price, kept a small commercial space in Millhaven, and taken on repair and calibration work, the kind of work that started at 7 and ended at 5, the kind that let him be home when Nora got off the school bus. He did not tell clients what he had done before. He did not display the patents. The framed letter from Pratt and Whitney lived in a cardboard box in the closet behind Nora's winter coats. Diane Mercer had arrived in Millhaven 3 months earlier to acquire a regional manufacturing consultancy called Hartwell Group. She had not come to look at the town. She had come to absorb an asset and leave. Her company occupied the top 2 floors of the only glass and steel building on Commerce Street, and she moved through Millhaven the way she moved through most places, efficiently, without particular attention to what she passed. Patrick, her assistant, had attended the auction on her behalf to scout used equipment for a client facility Mercer Industrial was outfitting. He had noted the Snap-on cabinet in his yellow legal pad as a possible acquisition. He had also noted, in a smaller hand at the bottom of the page, the name of the man who had originally owned the tools, which the auctioneer had mentioned in passing. Patrick had not yet mentioned this to Diane. He was not sure it was relevant. He filed it quietly, the way careful people file things they do not yet understand. The cabinet sold that Tuesday morning for $320 to a parts dealer from Nashua. The dealer opened the top drawer in the parking lot, looked at the contents for 40 seconds, and closed it again without expression. $320. Gone. Owen heard about the final price from the liquidator's paperwork Sandra forwarded without comment. He read the number once, set the paper on the kitchen table, and went to the shop. The Millhaven shop was 800 square feet, concrete floor, pegboard walls, a single overhead fluorescent that buzzed faintly in cold weather. It smelled of cutting oil and the particular metallic dryness of a space that is used seriously. Owen had rebuilt it from a bare shell over 18 months, not restored exactly, but returned to function, stripped of ornament, organized around the work. Every tool had a place. Every place was labeled. The labels were in his handwriting, small and even, the kind of handwriting that suggests a person who does not rush. He had taken on a calibration contract that week for a hydraulic press manufacturer in Keene. The work was not glamorous. It paid $85 an hour. He did it with the same attention he had once given to aerospace fixtures, because he did not know how to do it any other way. Diane Mercer's first visit to the Millhaven shop was not planned. She had been driving back from a site visit with a client on Route 9 when her Lees Mazasays developed an intermittent electrical fault, a dashboard warning that cycled on and off without apparent cause, the kind of fault that dealership technicians describe as ghost codes and charge 2 hours of diagnostic time to not resolve. Her assistant Patrick, riding in the passenger seat with his legal pad, searched his phone for the nearest automotive and electrical repair shop. The nearest result with a 4.9 rating was a place called Marsh Precision Services, 0.4 miles ahead on the right. She pulled in. The shop had no waiting room. There was a folding chair near the door and a Smalls mess heater that ticked when it cycled. Owen came out from under a lathe when he heard the bell above the door, wiping his hands on a cloth that was already dark with use. He was wearing a gray canvas work shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearm. He looked at the car, then at Diane, then back at the car. She told him what the fault code was. He nodded once. He asked her how long the warning had been cycling. She said 3 days. He said he would look at it and let her know what he found. She looked around the shop while she waited. She looked at the pegboard. She looked at the lathe. She looked at the folding chair and the space heater. She did not sit down. Patrick sat in the folding chair and opened his legal pad and wrote something at the bottom of a page. 22 minutes later, Owen came to the door and told her the fault was a corroded ground strap on the chassis harness, a common failure point on that model, and that he had cleaned and retorqued it. He said the repair would hold, but that the strap should be replaced within 6 months. He handed her a printed invoice. The charge was $45. She looked at the invoice. She looked at the shop. She said, "You could have charged 3 times this, and I wouldn't have known the difference." Owen said, "I know." She paid. She left. Patrick looked at the invoice as she drove, then looked at the shop receding in the side mirror, and wrote one more thing in his legal pad. He wrote Owen Marsh's name, and beneath it a single word, "Look." Diane did not think about the shop again that day. She had a 4 o'clock call with the Hartwell Group acquisition team and a dinner with a client at 7. The shop was an item resolved and filed. She had told 2 colleagues about it the following morning in her office. The way people tell small stories about unexpected competence in unexpected places, with a mild warmth that did not quite reach admiration. "Tiny shop," she said. "One guy, $45, could have been a disaster." She paused. "Probably does fine for what he does." She did not know what he did. She did not know yet what he had done. Patrick, at his desk outside her office, heard the story through the glass partition. He did not look up from his screen, but he opened a browser tab and typed the name he had written at the bottom of the page. What he found took him 11 minutes to read. He closed the tab and sat for a moment with his hands flat on his desk. Then he opened it again. 3 weeks after the auction, Owen began the work of replacing what had been sold. He did not do it with urgency. He did not do it with anger. He did it the way he did most things, methodically, starting from a list he had written in a small notebook, working through it in order, buying what he needed when he found it at a price that made sense. On day 4 of the rebuild, he found a set of Mitutoyo micrometers at an estate sale in Concord, a full-range set, true to 6 inches, in the original wooden case, all in calibration. He paid $180 for them. They were worth $900 at current market and worth considerably more to him because they were the same series he had used in the Concord shop, the series he had taught 2 apprentices to use, the series Claire had once picked up and turned in her hands and said looked like something from a museum, which he had taken as a compliment because he had meant it that way. He brought them home that evening and set them on the kitchen table. Nora looked at them across her homework. "Are those for measuring small things?" she asked. "Very small things," he said. She considered this. "Smaller than Clover's ear? Much smaller." She nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected, and went back to her worksheet. He did not explain to her what the micrometers were for, or what they had cost, or what they had replaced. She did not ask. She trusted that he knew what he was doing, the way children trust the adults who show up every day without drama, and he had not given her a reason to doubt that. On day 9, he sourced a brown and sharp surface plate from a machine shop in Manchester that was closing after 40 years. The plate was a grade A, 18 by 24 inches, in a cast iron stand, with a calibration certificate dated 14 months prior. Still within tolerance, still within use. The shop owner, a man named Gerald Foss, who was 71, and had the hands of a person who had spent a lifetime doing careful work, helped Owen load it into the truck without being asked. They did not discuss the price at length. Gerald named a number. Owen paid it. They shook hands in the parking lot, and Gerald said, "Take care of it," and Owen said he would. And both of them understood that the instruction was not about the plate. On day 14, Owen called Ray Castillo, who had bought the Concord shop. Ray drove down on a Saturday morning with his own truck and a set of angle blocks Owen had left behind in the sale, which Ray had kept in a cabinet for 3 years on the theory that Owen might someday want them back. He did not ask about the fee. He arrived at 7, set the blocks on the workbench, and stayed until noon helping Owen level and mount the surface plate. They worked without much conversation, the kind of quiet that belongs to people who have worked together long enough. That language is mostly redundant. Ray left at 12:15. He did not stay for lunch. He had a job to get back to. Nora came to the shop that afternoon. After her soccer practice, still in her cleats, Clover tucked under one arm. She stood in the doorway and looked at the surface plate, which Owen had just finished indicating flat to within 0.0001 inches across the full diagonal. "It looks like a very blue place," she said. Owen looked at the plate. It was gray, not blue. He did not correct her. He understood that she was describing something other than the color. On day 21, Patrick Nguyen, Diane Mercer's assistant, arrived at the shop alone, without announcement, at 8:47 in the morning. He was 26 years old and had been working for Diane for 2 years, and in those 2 years, he had developed a precise sense of when to bring her information and when to develop it further before doing so. He had spent 3 weeks developing this. He introduced himself. Owen shook his hand. Patrick said he had some questions if Owen had a few minutes. Owen said he had a few minutes. They stood near the workbench, and Patrick asked, in a careful and unhurried way, whether Owen was the same Owen Marsh who held the tooling fixture patents filed with the USTO in 2009 and 2013. Owen said he was. Patrick asked whether the Concord shop had been his. Owen said it had. Patrick asked whether Owen was currently taking on contract work. Owen said that depended on the work. Patrick wrote something in his legal pad, he said. "Thank you." He left. He sat in his car in the parking lot for 4 minutes before driving away. He had confirmed what the browser tab had told him 3 weeks ago. He was now deciding how to present it, and to whom and in what order. He drove back to Commerce Street. He did not go to Diane's office. He went to his desk and opened a document he had been building quietly for 11 days. And he added 3 lines to it. And he saved it, and he closed it. Diane Mercer did not know any of this yet. She was in a meeting about the Hartwell acquisition, discussing integration timelines and personnel redundancies with a precision that she considered one of her professional strengths. She was good at this. She had built Mercer Industrial Solutions from a regional consultancy into a firm with 47 employees and clients in 6 states, and she had done it through the kind of disciplined attention to structure that most people found either impressive or exhausting, depending on their position relative to it. She did not know that the man she had described as doing fine for what he did had, in the previous fiscal year, turned down a contract from a defense subcontractor worth $340 because it would have required him to travel for 6 consecutive weeks. She did not know that the same subcontractor had called him 4 more times in the following 8 months, each time at a higher number, and that he had declined each time for the same reason. She did not know that the tooling system he had developed in the Concord shop was still in active production use, generating royalty payments that arrived in his account on the 15th of each month, quiet as weather. She did not know that the tools she had valued at $300 had been the instruments of work that she would, in 60 days, be trying very hard to acquire. She did not know that yet. Patrick placed the document on her desk on a winter morning, without comment, before her first meeting. It was 4 pages. She read the first page and looked up. She read the second page and was still. She read the third and fourth pages slowly. The way a person reads something, they are checking against a prior assessment and finding the prior assessment insufficient. She set the document down. She picked it up again. She read the section about the Pratt & Whitney letter twice. She said, "How long have you had this?" Patrick said, "I've been building it for about 3 weeks." She was quiet for a moment. "And he's in that shop on Route 9. "Yes." She looked at the document again. She looked at the invoice she had kept, for reasons she had not examined, in the top drawer of her desk. $45. She set both pieces of paper on the desk side by side and looked at them together for a long moment. "Set up a meeting," she said. Patrick said, "I already have. Thursday at 10. She looked at him. He looked back, steady and without apology. She nodded once. She turned back to her screen. The meeting about Hartwell was in 12 minutes, and she had a great deal to think about between now and then. The Thursday meeting began at 10 o'clock and ended at 11:43. And in the 103 minutes between those 2 times, Diane Mercer's understanding of Owen Marsh was revised completely, though she did not say so aloud until the very end. She had come prepared. She had read Patrick's document twice more the night before, and she had done her own searching. The Usto filings, the Concord Shop's archived trade press mentions, a brief profile in a precision manufacturing journal from 2016 that described Owen's fixture tolerances as setting a new practical benchmark for small shop production. She had also, at 11 the previous night, found the Pratt & Whitney letter through a contact at a Boston Aerospace Consortium who confirmed, without being asked for confirmation, that the Concord shop had been considered a preferred vendor for prototype tooling, and that its closure had been, in the contact's exact words, a quiet loss to the field. She arrived at the shop at 9:58. Owen was at the surface plate when she came in, indicating a fixture he had built for the Keene press manufacturer. He set the indicator down, wiped his hands, and shook her hand. He did not comment on her being early. He did not comment on the document. He did not ask how she had spent the previous evening. Patrick sat in the folding chair with his legal pad. He did not open it. Diane told Owen what she needed. The Hartwell Group acquisition had surfaced a gap in Mercer Industrial's service capability, a precision calibration and tooling design function that she had expected to find inside Hartwell and had not. Two of Hartwell's largest clients required that function as a contractual deliverable. She needed it filled reliably within 60 days. She was not describing a job. She was describing a contract with scope and terms she had already drafted, which Patrick produced from a folder and set on the workbench beside the surface plate. Owen looked at the contract. He read it the way he read everything, without hurry, from the beginning to the end, without skimming. He asked two questions. One was about the travel requirement. Diane said the work was to be performed on site at the client facilities, but that the schedule was flexible and that she had structured the scope to allow for single-day site visits rather than extended residencies. She said she had done this deliberately. She did not explain why. Owen looked at her for a moment and then looked back at the contract. The second question was about the rate. She named a number. It was not $45 an hour. He was quiet for a moment. He said he would think about it. She said she understood. She stood in the shop in her charcoal blazer, and the shop smelled of cutting oil and the particular stillness of a place where serious work is done. And she looked at the pegboard and the labeled tools and the surface plate with its granite face and its calibration certificate taped to the stand, and she was quiet in a way that was different from the quiet she had brought into the room. Then she said, I made a comment at the auction in March about a tool cabinet. She paused. Her voice had shifted, not softened exactly, but recalibrated. The precision of it turned inward rather than outward. It was a dismissive comment. I didn't know whose tools they were. Another pause. I said something unkind. Owen said, You didn't know. No, she said. I didn't. She looked at the contract on the workbench. I'd like the chance to work with what I missed. He did not say that the tools were gone, that the cabinet had sold for $320 to a man from Nashua who had opened the top drawer and closed it again. He did not say that he had spent 31 days rebuilding what had been lost. One careful acquisition at a time until the shop was whole again. He did not say any of it. He picked up the contract and folded it once and set it in the chest pocket of his canvas shirt. I'll let you know by Friday, he said. She nodded. She left. Patrick stood from the folding chair and looked at Owen for a moment, and something passed between them that was not quite acknowledgement and not quite gratitude, and was perhaps simply the recognition that careful work, done quietly and over time, tends to surface eventually. Patrick nodded once he followed Diane out. The shop was quiet after they left. Owen stood at the workbench for a moment with his hand flat on the surface plate, feeling the cold precision of the granite through his palm. Then he went back to the fixture. He called Ray Castillo that evening and told him what had been offered. Ray was quiet for a moment and then said, You going to take it? Owen said he thought he probably would. Ray said, Good. He did not say anything else about it. They talked for 11 minutes about a carbide insert problem Ray was having on a turning operation, and Owen walked him through a feeds and speeds adjustment from memory, and they said good night. On Friday morning, Owen called Diane's office and told Patrick he was accepting the contract. Patrick said he'd send the paperwork. Owen said that was fine. He drove home that evening at 5:15, as he did every evening. Nora was at the kitchen table with her homework, Clover propped against the cereal box. She looked up when he came in and said, "There's soup." He took his jacket off and hung it on the hook by the door and sat down across from her and looked at her worksheet and asked her what she was working on. She said fractions. He said he could help with that. She slid the worksheet across the table. They sat there for 40 minutes, the two of them, the soup warm on the stove, the kitchen light falling in a rectangle across the table and across Nora's worksheet and across Clover, one dark ear. Owen explained the fractions without hurry. Nora understood them by the end. He carried her to bed at 8:30. She was not quite asleep, but close. Clover went under her arm. He turned off the light in her room and stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to the house settle around them. He went back to the kitchen and washed the bowls and set them in the rack and turned off the overhead light. The garage light was still on. It threw a long yellow rectangle across the driveway, the same as it did every night, falling on the truck and the concrete and the quiet dark beyond, the same as it always had. Some things are missed because no one looks long enough. Some things are undervalued because a person doing the valuing has not yet learned what careful attention costs or what it produces. Owen Marsh had learned both of those things early, and he had passed neither lesson on in words. He had passed them on the only way they can be passed, by doing the work, unhurried and correct, day after day, in a small shop on Route 9, while the world moved quickly past the door. The garage light stayed on. It always did.